Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of the Servant Girl Annihilator, America's first serial killer, Austin, Texas 1884-1885. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. The city of Austin, Texas, 1884. A year before Jack the Ripper began his London murders, a killer was prowling the streets of the Texas capital, dragging women from their beds and murdering them with an axe. The newspapers called him the Servant Girl Annihilator because his first victims were black domestic servants, sleeping in the outbuildings of their employers' homes. Between December 1884 and December 1885, the Annihilator killed 8 people, some accounts say 12, wounded many more, and terrorized a city of 22,000 people for an entire year before the murders stopped as suddenly as they had started. He was never caught. He may have continued killing in other cities. And he is historically significant for a reason that most Americans don't know. He may have been the template for Jack the Ripper. The Austin murders followed a pattern that criminologists now recognize as classic organized serial killing. A consistent victim type, women, primarily servants, a consistent weapon, an axe or sharp instrument, wounds concentrated on the head, and evidence of sexual motivation. The Annihilator attacked in the small hours of the morning, entered through windows or back doors, and killed with ferocious violence before disappearing without leaving witnesses who survived to describe him. When he upgraded to white women among his later victims, the Austin city government finally declared a state of emergency. The Texas Rangers were called in. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was hired. Multiple suspects were arrested, tried, and acquitted. The Annihilator was never identified. And then a curious fact emerged years after the Austin murders. A black servant named Malay Cook, who had worked in Austin during the period of the murders and was a suspect wrongly accused but briefly jailed, subsequently traveled to London and arrived there in 1888, the year the Jack the Ripper murders began. The year London experienced its own series of murders of vulnerable women in the pre-dawn hours. Historians Skip Hollandsworth and others have noted the chronological coincidence and have argued it warrants serious investigation. Did America's first serial killer travel to London and become England's most famous one? The evidence is circumstantial. The question has never been definitively answered. But the Austin murders of 1884-85 cast a long shadow backward through American history as the first serial killing in a major U.S. city, and possibly forward to Whitechapel. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the world of history's most enduring unsolved crimes, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Amateur investigation of cold cases has undergone a revolution in the digital age. What once required physical access to evidence rooms, courthouse archives, and retired detectives now requires, in many cases, only an internet connection and a willingness to spend several hundred hours reading. Online communities dedicated to specific cases have grown to tens of thousands of members, coordinating the analysis of evidence across continents and time zones, cross-referencing witness accounts, and applying analytical frameworks drawn from criminology, forensic accounting, and intelligence analysis. This democratization of investigation has produced real results. Amateur researchers have identified previously overlooked evidence in multiple high-profile cases. Citizen DNA investigations have generated viable leads that professional investigators subsequently pursued. Open-source intelligence techniques, originally developed for geopolitical analysis, have been applied to cold cases with unexpected success, identifying locations from historical photographs, tracking financial transactions through public records, and mapping suspect movements through odd documents. But amateur investigation has also produced harm. Innocent people have been named online as suspects by communities whose enthusiasm outran their evidence. Families of victims have been subjected to intrusive and sometimes harassing contact from self-appointed investigators. Evidence has been disturbed by unauthorized site visits. The power of collective human intelligence, when applied to genuine mystery, is remarkable. The question is whether it can be channeled in ways that help rather than harm the living people caught in the blast radius of historical crimes. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Servant Girl Annihilator, America's first serial killer. Austin, Texas 1884-1885 is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Austin Servant Girl murders began on December 30, 1884, with the attack on Molly Smith, a black servant who was dragged from her bed in the backyard cottage of her employer and killed with an axe. Smith's male companion was seriously wounded in the same attack. This established the pattern. The Annihilator attacked sleeping women in the night, concentrating blows on the head, and wounded or killed male companions who attempted to respond. Over the following year, 7 more women were killed and multiple additional people were wounded, with the final double murder occurring on December 24, 1885, Christmas Eve, when 2 white women, Eula Phillips and Susan Hancock, were killed in their homes. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the 1885 murders created genuine civic panic in Austin. City Council authorized additional police patrols. Private citizens formed neighborhood watch groups. Women refused to sleep on the ground floor. The governor of Texas deployed Texas Rangers to assist Austin police. The Pinkerton Agency was hired by the city at significant expense. Multiple suspects were arrested, jailed, and tried. All were acquitted for lack of evidence. The Austin Statesman covered the murders extensively, using the nickname Servant Girl Annihilator that a reporter coined for the killer. The name stuck in the historical record despite its deeply callous framing. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The victims were predominantly black women in the period when Austin was a segregated city and violence against black citizens was routinely under-investigated. Historians have noted that the murders of black servants did not receive the same police response as the later murders of white women. It was only when Eula Phillips and Susan Hancock, both white, were killed on December 24, 1885, that the full resources of the city and state were deployed. This racial disparity in investigative response is now considered one reason the killer was never identified. Had the first murders been treated with the same urgency as the last, forensic opportunities might not have been missed. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, several suspects were seriously investigated by Austin police and by the Pinkerton Agency. A black man named Nathan Elgin was convicted of attacking one victim and executed. Some historians believe he was the Annihilator, but the convicting evidence was legally inadequate by modern standards, and the conviction relied heavily on racial bias rather than forensic evidence. Other suspects included various Austin residents with a history of violence. None of the serious suspects was ever conclusively linked to the murders by physical evidence, and the case was closed without an official determination of the perpetrator's identity. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of historian Skip Hollandsworth's 2014 book, The Midnight Assassin, made the case that the Austin Servant Girl murders were America's first documented serial killing by a single organized perpetrator, predating the Whitecapel murders of 1888 by 4 years, and predating the serial killer concept itself by nearly a century. Hollandsworth's analysis of the cases, using modern criminological frameworks applied to 19th century records, established that the Austin murders showed all the hallmarks of organized serial predation: consistent victim type, consistent method, evidence of planning, return to familiar attack sites, and wound patterns suggesting sexual motivation. The book also explored the possible London connection. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the London connection rests on the movement of a cook named James Kelly, who escaped from Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital in 1888, the year of the Ripper murders, and remained at large. More specifically, historian Christopher Scott explored the theory that a specific Austin suspect's movements in 1888 could be traced to London, though definitive documentation is elusive. The mechanism proposed is that an individual with a history of violence against servants in Austin relocated to London, where a different police environment and a different victim population enabled him to resume his activities. The theory remains contested among historians and criminologists, but has gained academic attention. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Servant Girl Annihilator, America's first serial killer. Austin, Texas, 1884-1885. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the transient worker theory holds that the Austin Annihilator was an itinerant laborer or worker who arrived in Austin, committed the murders over a one-year period, and then moved on to another city when police pressure increased. This theory accounts for the abrupt cessation of the murders in December 1885 without any identified arrest or death of a suspect. Under this model, the killer continued his activities in other cities with less notoriety. The possible London connection, if true, would be consistent with this theory: a violent transient who moved from Austin to other American cities and eventually crossed the Atlantic. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the local resident theory, which was the framework used by Austin police in 1885, holds that the Annihilator was a permanent Austin resident who knew the city, knew the locations of Servant's quarters, and had access to the areas where the murders occurred. Under this model, the cessation of the murders reflects either the death of the killer, his imprisonment on unrelated charges, or a personal decision to stop killing following the December 1885 attacks. The Nathan Elgin conviction and execution fits this theory if Elgin was truly responsible, but historical review has cast doubt on the conviction's validity. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Jack the Ripper connection theory, the most speculative but historically intriguing hypothesis, proposes that the Austin killer is the same individual as the Whitechapel murderer, or that the Austin murders directly inspired the Ripper's approach. Proponents note the chronological sequence, the similarities in victim type and attack method, and the documented movement of some Austin-connected individuals to England in 1887-88. Critics note that the Austin murders involved an axe and the Ripper used a knife, that the victim selection differed in significant ways, and that the connection relies on coincidence and motivated reasoning rather than documented evidence. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Servant Girl Annihilator, America's first serial killer, Austin, Texas, 1884-1885, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the physical evidence from the 1884-85 murders was limited and poorly documented by modern standards. The weapon was never recovered. No reliable witness descriptions of the attacker were obtained. Survivors of attacks in darkened rooms provided contradictory descriptions. The crime scenes were examined by medical officers who documented the injuries but did not apply systematic forensic methods. The most consistent physical evidence was the wound pattern. The murders showed a consistent preference for head wounds inflicted from above and behind, suggesting the killer struck victims who were lying down or bending, which is a posture-specific attack pattern consistent with a single killer with a consistent method. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the newspaper record of the Austin murders is the primary historical evidence and has been systematically analyzed by historians. The Statesman's coverage from December 1884 to January 1886 provides dates, victim names, approximate times of attacks, wound descriptions, and some investigative detail. Cross-referencing these accounts with police records that partially survived in the Austin History Center has allowed historians to establish a reliable chronology and victim list. The documentary evidence firmly establishes that a series of related murders occurred in Austin and that they shared consistent features pointing to a single perpetrator. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. The criminological analysis comparing the Austin murders to subsequent serial killing cases provides the strongest evidence for classifying the Annihilator as an organized serial predator rather than a spree killer or multiple unrelated incidents. The one-year period, the consistent victim type, the return to familiar areas, the escalation from black to white victims, possibly reflecting both victim accessibility and growing boldness, and the abrupt cessation after police pressure all fit the organized serial killer profile that has been extensively documented in 20th and 21st century cases. This retrospective classification, while not criminal evidence, establishes the historical significance of the Austin murders as America's earliest documented example of this type of crime. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Servant Girl Annihilator, America's first serial killer, Austin, Texas 1884-1885. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Austin Servant Girl murders have been rediscovered by historians and true crime researchers in recent decades, primarily through Skip Hollandsworth's 2014 book, The Midnight Assassin. The book was optioned for film adaptation and sparked renewed interest in both the Austin murders themselves and the possible Ripper connection. Academic criminologists have used the Austin case to support arguments about the historical depth of organized serial predation, pushing back the timeline of this type of crime in American history from the 1970s, when the concept of serial killer was coined, to the 1880s. The racial dimensions of the case, the systematic underinvestigation of Black victims, and the failure to deploy full resources until white women were killed, have received particular attention in recent years as part of the broader historical reckoning with racial inequality in American law enforcement. Historians have argued that if the murders of the Black servants in late 1884 had been investigated with the same urgency applied to the 1885 white victims, the Austin Annihilator might have been caught before he killed anyone else. This counterfactual is not merely academic. It describes a pattern of differential policing that shaped outcomes in American true crime for decades after 1885. The Annihilator remains unidentified. His victims, most of them Black women whose names were initially afterthoughts in the newspapers that covered their deaths, are now the focus of the serious historical attention they always deserved. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Servant Girl Annihilator, America's first serial killer, Austin, Texas 1884-1885. From the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Servant Girl Annihilator ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.